Stay exactly where you are, and for a moment let the modern world fade into the static of the background. Sit a little closer to the hearth, for the story I have for you tonight is one that breathes within the very walls you think protect you. Outside, the London fog is thick, a heavy gray shroud that clings to the iron railings and gas lamps, but inside this grand Victorian mansion, everything is gold, silk, and silence. Or so it seems. We are told that these great houses were monuments to family, status, and the shining light of progress. But the Victorian mansion was not a home. It was a complex, multi-layered machine designed for one singular cruel purpose: total social deception. It was a stage where the actors lived in the light, while an entire army of invisible souls operated the levers in the dark. Tonight, we are going to walk through the doors that were never meant to be opened. We are going to explore the ghost path, the secret, labyrinthine world of the Victorian servant. Before we descend into the lightless passages beneath the floorboards, I invite you to join our circle. If you find a strange sort of peace in uncovering the shadows of the past, please consider leaving a mark of your presence. A like, a thoughtful comment, or sharing this chronicle with a fellow seeker of mysteries helps keep our lanterns burning through the long night. Your company is the heartbeat of these stories. Imagine you are a guest at a high society dinner in 1875. You sit at a table of polished mahogany, surrounded by the scent of roasted pheasant and expensive French wine. The air is still, the service is flawless, and the room feels as though it functions by magic. A plate appears, a glass is refilled, a candle is trimmed, all without a sound, without a disruption. To you, the Victorian gentleman or lady, the servants do not exist as people. They are meant to be as silent and invisible as the air itself. This was the hardware of the house. To achieve this illusion of effortless luxury, the Victorian mansion was built with a second shadow architecture, a parallel universe of narrow, lightless corridors and steep, winding stairs hidden behind the velvet wallpaper. This was the ghost path. Every grand house was a double-edged sword. While the family enjoyed high ceilings and vast windows, the servants lived in the interstitial spaces, the gaps between the walls. They moved through back staircases so narrow that two people could barely pass, carrying heavy trays of coal and boiling water in total darkness. They were the blood in the veins of the house, pumping life into the rooms above, yet they were forbidden from ever being seen. If a housemaid were to accidentally encounter a member of the family in a main hallway, she was expected to turn her face to the wall or disappear into a doorway as if she were a ghost. To be seen was to fail. To be heard was a sin. Image prompt: a wide cinematic shot of a Victorian hallway with a hidden door blending into the wallpaper partially open, revealing a dark, cramped servant's staircase inside the wall. Contrast this for a moment with your modern life. We live in open-plan homes where every corner is visible, where the person who cleans or cooks is a part of our immediate reality, often a friend or a family member. We value transparency. But the Victorian refuge was built on the horror of contact. The elite wanted the fruit of labor without ever witnessing the sweat. They wanted the warmth of the fire without ever seeing the man who hauled the coal from the freezing cellar. This deception was so absolute that architects designed baize doors, heavy, cloth-lined doors that muffled the sounds of the kitchen and the screams of work, separating the world of the seen from the world of the unseen. As you sit in your honest, modern room, feel the weight of that silence. Imagine spending 18 hours a day in a tunnel within a wall, your entire existence dedicated to maintaining a lie for people who would not recognize your face if they saw you in the street. The Victorian mansion was a masterpiece of engineering, but it was also a psychological prison. It was a world where the walls truly had ears and the shadows truly had hands. But the ghost path hid more than just labor. It hid the profound loneliness of a class of people who lived in the center of the family, yet remained forever on the outside. Stay with me, for the fire is shifting, and as we move deeper into the basement, we will find that the darkness of the ghost path was not just in the hallways, but in the very souls of those who walked them. The chill in the air deepens as we move away from the golden glow of the parlor and begin our descent. To understand the true cost of Victorian elegance, we must leave the silk-lined world above and enter the belly of the beast. In your modern home, the kitchen is often the heart of the house, a bright, clean space of stainless steel and soft lighting where the family gathers to share the day's stories. It is a place of connection. But in the Victorian mansion, the kitchen was a subterranean factory of misery, a sunless cavern where the invisible army fought a daily war against heat, filth, and exhaustion. This was the engine room of the deception, located as far as possible from the refined senses of the masters, tucked away in the damp, airless depths of the basement. Imagine stepping off the hidden back staircase and into the Victorian kitchen at 4 o'clock in the morning. The air is not fresh, it is a thick, choking soup of coal smoke, boiling grease, and the damp scent of stone walls that never see the sun. There are no extraction fans, no bright LED lights. There is only the roaring, hellish heat of the great cast-iron range, a massive black altar that consumed hundreds of pounds of coal every day. While the family upstairs enjoyed a perfectly tempered breeze from their high windows, the kitchen staff lived in a permanent tropical fever. The temperature near the ovens often climbed above 100 degrees. Yet the windows, if there were any at all, were small, barred, and placed at street level, offering a view of nothing but the muddy boots of passers-by. This is the visceral contrast that defines our journey tonight. The modern ease of a microwave beep versus the rhythmic, back-breaking violence of Victorian preparation. Every drop of water used in this house had to be pumped by hand and carried up 3 flights of stairs in heavy copper cans. Every carpet was beaten until the lungs of the housemaids were gray with dust. Every silver spoon was polished with abrasive powders until the fingers bled. We look at a Victorian menu and see refined dining, but the reality was a scene of industrial carnage. A single dinner party required the plucking of dozens of birds, the scrubbing of endless copper pots with sand and vinegar, and the constant, frantic movement of bodies through the steam. The staff who lived here were not merely employees. They were the hardware of the house, and like any machinery, they were expected to function until they broke. The scullery maid, often a girl no older than 13, spent her entire existence at the wet sink, her hands permanently red and cracked from the lye soap and freezing water. She was the lowest rank in this hidden hierarchy, a ghost among ghosts, living in a space that was constantly damp and infested with the very rats the family upstairs pretended did not exist. This was the refuge the elite had built for themselves, a sanctuary of peace bought with the physical destruction of the young and the poor, hidden just a few feet beneath their polished floorboards. Image prompt: a dark, atmospheric Victorian kitchen basement. Low light from a coal range illuminates a young scullery maid scrubbing a massive copper pot. Steam and smoke fill the air, and the stone walls are damp. The scale of the iron stove looks imposing and monstrous. As you sit in your quiet, climate-controlled room, listen to the hum of your refrigerator. It is a sound of safety. For the Victorian servant, silence was not a comfort, it was a requirement of their survival. They worked in a world of clatter and heat, yet they were expected to be as quiet as the stone walls around them. The ghost path extended into their very biology. They learned to walk on the balls of their feet, to breathe shallowly, and to communicate in whispers. They were a class of people living in a sensory vacuum, denied the light of the sun and the sound of their own voices. All so the deception above could remain unbroken. But as the fire in our hearth flickers, we must realize that this physical toll was only the beginning. For in the narrow rooms at the very top of the house, the shadow world held secrets of a different, more psychological kind. The fire is gasping for air now, the wood turning to a skeletal white ash, much like the faces of those who climbed the final, most grueling stretch of the ghost path. To reach the servants' sleeping quarters, one had to ascend past the grand bedrooms of the masters, past the nurseries filled with expensive toys, and up a hidden, vertical spiral of stone that led to the very scalp of the house, the attics. In our modern world, we look at attic conversions as cozy retreats, sun-drenched lofts with skylights and reading nooks. But for the Victorian servant, the attic was not a room, it was a cell. It was the final destination of the invisible army, a place where the deception was so complete that the human beings who ran the house were quite literally tucked into the rafters, like unwanted insulation. Imagine pushing open a small, unpainted wooden door at the end of a 16-hour shift. There is no fireplace here, no thick rugs to soften the cold of the floorboards. In the winter, the water in the wash basin freezes into a solid disk of ice. In the summer, the slate roof just inches above your head turns the room into a stifling oven. Here, 4 or 5 maids would share a space no larger than your modern walk-in closet. They slept on thin straw mattresses that rustled with the movements of fleas and bedbugs, the only companions they were allowed to have. There were no pictures on the walls, no personal trinkets, for a servant was not supposed to have a personality. They were a function, a biological extension of the house's plumbing and heating, and functions do not need memories. This is the psychological contraste de choc that haunts the ghost path. The family below lived in a world of maximum sentiment, where every locket contained a hair and every wall held a portrait. But the servants lived in a world of absolute erasure. They were often forbidden from using their real names if a previous servant had shared them. A maid might be called Jane for 20 years, simply because it was easier for the mistress to remember. They lived in the heart of a family, hearing the laughter of children and the music of the piano, yet they were as isolated as if they were on a desert island. They were non-persons, inhabiting a shadow world. Image prompt: a cramped, freezing Victorian attic room with tilted ceilings. 2 maids are huddled under thin blankets on straw pallets. A tiny, barred window shows a sliver of a cold, moonlit London roofscape. The atmosphere is one of profound isolation and silence. Consider the silence of these attic cells. In your modern life, if you feel lonely, you reach for a device and connect with the world. You have a voice. But the Victorian servant lived in a state of enforced solitude. They were often forbidden from having followers, a Victorian term for boyfriends or even friends. A knock at the back door from a sister or a suitor could result in instant dismissal without a character reference, which in 1880 was a death sentence of poverty. They lived in a house full of people, yet they were legally and socially prohibited from forming a single human bond within its walls. They watched the family grow, marry, and die, serving as the silent witnesses to a life they were never allowed to taste. As the last embers of our fire crackle, feel the immense weight of that psychological cage. We think our modern lives are complicated, but we own our identities. We are the masters of our own narratives. The souls on the ghost path were the ultimate refugees of reality, living in a gold-plated prison where their only privacy was found in the few hours of dark before the 4 a.m. bell screamed them back to life. But even in this world of total control, the house could not stay silent forever. For the walls of a Victorian mansion were not just stone and mortar, they were built of secrets, and as we move to the final threshold of our journey, we will see what happens when the invisible finally decides to leave a mark. The fire has dwindled to a single, pulsing ember, a lonely red eye staring out from the darkness of the grate. We have walked the lightless stairs and felt the damp chill of the scullery, but now we must listen to the sounds that the masters of the house were never meant to hear. In our modern age, we are obsessed with leaving a legacy. We post our every thought to a digital cloud, desperate for the world to know we were here. But for the Victorian servant, the greatest act of rebellion was the simple preservation of their own humanity. They were meant to be ghosts, but ghosts have a way of leaving echoes. Beneath the rigid silence of the ghost path, there was a vibrant, defiant, and sometimes dangerous underworld, the secret language of the invisible. I want you to imagine the moment the heavy baize door swung shut and the servant stepped into the below-stairs sanctuary. The transformation was instantaneous. The bowed head lifted, the silent tongue loosened, and the non-person became a human being again. While the family upstairs played at being perfect, the servants were the keepers of the true history of the house. They knew which master drank too much brandy in the library, which mistress wept behind her locked bedroom door, and which noble son was gambling away the family fortune. This was the gossip economy, a powerful hidden currency that turned the invisible into the most informed people in London. They weren't just cleaning the house, they were cataloging its sins. This is the deconstruction of expectations that defines the end of the ghost path. The masters thought they were in control because they held the keys, but the servants were in control because they held the secrets. Every scrap of information gathered while dusting a desk or overhearing a whisper in the hallway was carried back to the servants' hall. It was a world of shared subversion. They would mimic the masters' accents, mock their finery, and share a raw, visceral camaraderie that the lonely elite upstairs could never understand. In their shared misery, they found a depth of community that our modern, isolated work-from-home culture has completely lost. We have the comfort of our couches, but they had the brotherhood of the shadows. Image prompt: a dimly lit Victorian servants' hall at night. A group of servants are huddled around a wooden table lit by a single candle. Their faces are animated and human, laughing and whispering. In the background, the bells on the wall, used to call them, are silent and still. But sometimes, the echoes in the walls were more than just whispers. Occasionally, a servant would leave a permanent mark, a signature of the unseen. Architects today, during renovations of these grand mansions, often find messages hidden behind the lath and plaster. A name scrawled in charcoal, a dated newspaper stuffed into a gap, or a single shoe placed beneath the floorboards for luck. These were desperate reachings for immortality. They were saying, "I was here. I breathed this air. I suffered in this silence, and I will not be erased." They turned the very architecture of their deception into a time capsule of their existence. As the morning light begins to bleed through the fog outside, we must ask ourselves, what happened to the ghost path? It didn't just disappear. It crumbled under the weight of its own hypocrisy. When the Great War arrived and the world finally tilted on its axis, the invisible army walked out of the basements and never looked back. They chose the dangerous freedom of the factory over the gilded prison of the mansion. The great deception failed because the human spirit cannot be sustained by bread and silence alone. It requires the light of recognition. Now, as you stand up and return to the safety of your modern life, take a deep, clear breath. Look at the walls of your home. They are thin, they are honest, and they hold no secret stares. You live in the light. You have a name that is spoken, a face that is seen, and a voice that is heard. The refuge of the past was a beautiful, hollow lie, bought with the stolen lives of the invisible. As you extinguish the last light of this chronicle, feel a profound sense of peace. You are not a ghost in someone else's story. You are the master of your own. I thank you for walking the ghost path with me tonight. If these echoes of the past have touched a chord in your soul, stay within our circle. Your presence is what keeps these voices from fading into the fog. Tell me in the comments, if you were trapped in that house, would you have sought your freedom? Or would you have left a secret message in the walls for us to find 100 years later? Until the lanterns are lit again, stay safe, stay seen, and remember, even the silent walls have stories to tell.